Hello, everyone. Welcome to our PhD Doctor of Philosophy of Education student panel session. We are so thrilled that you are here to learn a little bit about the program and to hear from current students in the PhD program here at the School of Education. My name is Serena Stewart. I'm Associate Director of Admissions. Some of you may have already had conversations with me about the admissions process. But if this is your first peek inside of the PhD program, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time this afternoon. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gelbach to get us kicked off.
Great. Thanks so much, Serena. Delighted to have you guys here. I know schedules are busy, so really appreciate you taking the time. Um, my name's Hunter Gelbach. I do direct the PhD program here at the Johns Hopkins School of Education. I also have a ancillary role as faculty co-director for education, the Johns Hopkins Institute of Planetary Health, where I do that work. Is really trying to think about this kind of big idea of if the planet is not healthy, we're not going to be healthy. The focus today very much is not me. We want to turn things over to a handful of student presenters. And so I'm going to say two quick things starting on the next slide. Just to get us kind of oriented a little bit, I suspect some of you have probably been to one of the previous sessions that we've had. And so a lot of these themes will probably look familiar, but so much, at least in my opinion, of trying to figure out this whole PhD program thing is about fit. And so, yes, of course, people get sort of pulled into thinking about, important things like life-wise, where you want to live, prestige of the program, those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, I kind of feel like if you're not finding a program that's a good fit for what your needs are, what your academic interests are, what your vision for what you want to do, what you want to be when you grow up, if you will, if those fits aren't there, it's probably not a great match. And so for Hopkins, for our PhD program, it is a small program and kind of intimate in a lot of ways. And so the fits, the kind of key characteristics, which I would argue are fits, and we'll get some probably thoughts from the students about this as well, is if you're looking for an apprenticeship experience, so everyone in the program really works closely with one, sometimes a couple advisors. But that, one-on-one, one-on-a-couple relationship, I think is a real key characteristic. So you do have a cohort that you come in with, and you are taking classes with folks, so there's a balance. But I think the apprenticeship is what most of our students walk away with thinking is kind of the more distinctive, special quality and characteristic. Second thing, if you're looking for an interdisciplinary approach, so we do leverage particularly sort of psychology of education on the one hand, sociology on the other hand, to try and influence policy and practice. So a lot of kind of educational policy themes come through as well. And so in some ways, those three areas, policy, educational psychology or science of learning, and sociology are kind of the anchors. But you will get exposure to all three of those. And so if being able to sort of approach and wrestle with problems from different angles, from different vantage points, using different theoretical lenses is appealing, then it's a good fit. If you're like, I want to do this and only this, you should know you're going to have to take some courses that are going to stretch you in different ways. And, for some people, that's great. Other people, not so much. Rigorous methodological training, I think, has been a kind of a hallmark of the program for years now. The next one, you want to learn research approaches of the future, is maybe a little more cryptic. So there's a fairly solid focus in the program on open science approaches to doing educational research. And what we mean by open science, what is sort of out there in the field, is this idea of really increasing and improving transparency. So you've probably all, well, some of you have probably heard the expression that you really don't want to torture your data until it tells you what you want to hear. And part of the problems that have been happening in educational research and social psychology before that, and medicine before that, are that because it's so easy to run statistical tests now, people do torture their data, find these things that they want to hear, and then publish those. And those are, of course, not going to be able to replicate in other studies. And so we start losing our knowledge of like what actually works and what, is a little bit more like snake oil. And so this emphasis on how to do these more transparent practices, how to address this problem of data torture, and there are a handful of other practices that just make research stronger, more rigorous, more likely to replicate in the future, and ultimately more useful for practitioners, is another kind of hallmark and signature of the program. Fifth and final thing on my personal little fit indicators, and again, once we get into Q&A, you should probably ask students about their impressions of this too, if it doesn't come up. There are some programs out there where you can really sort of do theoretical work just for theory's sake and for the sake of, building new theoretical knowledge. For being at Hopkins, there's really going to be a press on you to actually improve educational practice and policy. And in a perfect world, you're absolutely making those contributions to theory as well. But it's not just that, right? We really do want to see some real world consequences of your work. Finally, maybe the biggest thing that you'll want to think about in terms of fit, so I guess this is sort of my bonus one, is the right advisor or maybe team of advisors at this institution. And so if you really are just dying to study, underwater basket weaving, like we don't actually have a faculty member who does that. And so if that is your passion, think hard about whether Hopkins is the right place for you. Okay, couple final things. At this time of year, we're just a little over a month out of when applications are due. And so trying to anticipate a couple questions that you guys might have. And then I promise I really will turn it over to the students. Huge, important things, I think, to keep in mind. Communicating with key faculty, right? So you probably want to get a little feel for, like, is that advisor who might be a fit with me? My interests seem to overlap with their interests, but are they still doing those interests? Have they shifted in their focus and orientation? And so as you communicate with faculty, maybe scoping out a little bit of that matching, overlapping interest is a good thing to ask questions about. Make sure they're taking students next year. Some people go on sabbatical from time to time and decide not to. Others happen to be, taking a job somewhere else every once in a while. And so, figuring out, do they plan on being at the institution moving forward? Typically, that's a pretty safe bet, but, doesn't hurt to double check. Second, and so you can incorporate that information into your application, into your personal statement. Second thing that I'd recommend is not to put all your eggs in one faculty basket. And so if you really have a great person who you'd love to work with, but just in this one sort of narrow little way, that's fairly high risk, right? Their interest could change, your interest could change. They could leave the institution, working styles might not work out. And so really, I think thinking about programs where there are a couple different people who you're excited to work with typically is going to make more sense. This is kind of my takeaway, and I'll be curious to hear what the students have to say, but when I read the personal statements in particular, I feel like there's a big difference between people who sort of put out a research topic. I'm really interested in self-efficacy versus a research question. I want to know if improving self-efficacy allows students to improve their academic achievement in science classes, that kind of a thing. No one's going to hold you to the research question, but it signals that you know how to think in this kind of way. And so it's just going to kind of set your application apart from others. Big question we get is sort of like, what are you looking for? And I think the big things we're looking for is one, this question of fit, and two, sort of what your potential is as a researcher. And so obviously past experience as a researcher is a really good kind of predictor and way to signal that to us. But it is certainly not the only way. Last note, and this will maybe be a little harder to execute, but recommenders who are able to give more sort of concrete examples that can kind of reinforce and complement your statement tend to be really helpful. The recommenders who say, you know, so-and-so is amazing and got an A in my class. And, you know, I mean, it's like grade inflation is pretty rampant. And so there's a lot of people out there who get A's in the class, and the professor can say nice things in sort of the abstract. But if they can actually talk about the kind of researcher we'd be getting if there's a match and if you come here, that can be much, much more helpful, especially as we, you know, try and kind of round out a full cohort of students. So let me pause there and let's flip it over to the students who I think can introduce themselves.
I suppose I'll go first since I'm first on the slide. My name is Aysen Malakasemi. Without an introductory prompt, I guess I'll just say a couple things. I'm in my second year, and I'm interested in researching exclusionary discipline. My advisors are Olivia Marcucci, who mostly does work in the EDD program, as a matter of fact, and Rebecca Cruz, who does lots of work with the PhD program. I'll pass it to Lily.
Hi, my name is Lily, and I am a third-year PhD student in the program. My advisor is Hunter, and I do research in student social connections in schools and outside of schools. Yeah, I am an international student, so welcome any questions about that too.
And Lily does have to leave us a little bit early. So if you have burning questions for Lily, you might stick those in the chat sooner than later.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel McClam. I'm a fourth-year PhD student. My research is in mathematics equity. I look at the intersection of teachers as agents and the structures that surround them, and specifically ask questions about how we can support teachers to enact equitable practices in their classroom. Like Aysen, I work with Becca. So we both have the same advisor, and I have changed advisors during the program. So if you have questions about that specifically, I'm happy to field questions about that.
Super helpful. So I might actually start us out super basic, like why a PhD in the first place? It is a big decision and it's a life decision. It's not just an academic decision. Yeah, any snippets from your respective personal journeys that you think would be helpful for folks to hear?
I can go first. So for me, before PhD, I worked in university in student life. So as staff who work full-time, we do have research opportunities of doing action research, of doing program evaluation, but I always thought that I don't have professional development opportunities. I don't have time to think about the things happening in my work. So I think PhD is an opportunity for me to think about questions that I have, and also a time for a break from work and to go back to school, and also a change of living environment from another country to the US as well.
I'm happy to share a bit too. I come from a pretty deep practitioner background. I started as a math teacher, and then I was a principal most recently before coming to get my PhD. So I'm kind of a mid-career change PhD student. And I think for me, there are a couple things that drove the decision to get a PhD. The first is that I had a lot of experience, but I had one particular experience, and I was really interested in broadening my understanding of kind of education writ large and the systems that surround it. And then when I thought about what I wanted to do next, after being a principal, I was really interested in supporting novice teachers and kind of that pipeline into the teacher profession. And so with a desire to work in teacher preparation programs and with pre-service teachers, that drove me to think about the kinds of experiences that I would need. And then, because some of you might be thinking about an EDD program versus a PhD program, kind of that orientation toward research within that, to ask my own questions and seek kind of novel answers is part of what drove me into a PhD program as opposed to getting an EDD.
Ison, anything to add?
Sure. So just the personal background. So I'm also from a practitioner background. I taught music for 7 years, actually, mostly in elementary school, but also at an alternative school setting. I just found I had a lot of questions left unanswered about disciplines specifically in schools. And it's something that you don't really cover in teacher prep. And it's this thing that we kind of go untalked about, and kids kind of disappear from school and you don't know what happens to them. So with my, I have a really strong sense for justice and equity, especially for our multiply marginalized students. And I had a lot of curiosity around what is happening, why is it happening? And I was seeking a program and a place that would have the infrastructure to help me answer those questions. There are such things as public scholars. You can kind of get this information without a program necessarily, but I knew that I needed the infrastructure and the support that a program could give me.
Oh, so super helpful. And actually a nice transition to the next question I want to ask. But the one thing that I think got said implicitly, but I just want to state it explicitly, particularly around Rachel's distinction between the EDD and the PhD. The PhD degree is not just that it's about research, because the EDD is doing that too, but it is about research that produces generalizable knowledge. And so the types of questions that get asked and the sort of goal of and structure of how you want to do that research tends to look pretty different than EDD kind of research, which would be very localized to a particular place usually. All right, so Ison, you set us up nicely with a little bit of at least one hint of why you chose Hopkins as opposed to the many, many other places you could have gone. Lily, Rachel, thoughts on why Hopkins?
I say this not because my advisor is here, but I do prioritize, I think, different things, including advisor match and funding opportunity, and also living conditions of like weather and stuff. Yeah, compounding factors contributed to my choice.
How about you, Rachel? Any other factors that influence your decision?
I think just to call back to something that you said about the program, Hunter, in terms of its interdisciplinary nature, that's something that really drew me to the Hopkins program in particular. My background is in psychology. I have less of a background in sociology, but I'm interested, even though I ask questions that are more psychological in nature, in situating that inquiry within kind of the sociological surround. And so I think being able to go to a program where I got a balance of both of those things was something really important to me.
Great. As you were sort of figuring out why you wanted a PhD, screening different programs, you're presumably doing some version of this kind of like, is this place going to be a fit for me? What were some of and I gave my list already, what were some of the things that were influential in you deciding whether or not it's a fit?
One of the things that I was looking for, because I wanted to be a full-time student, and so I was looking for other programs where I would be around other full-time students. That, there were a number of programs where you could choose to be full-time or part-time, but I wanted to be part of a community where everyone else was kind of in this with me. So that was a big kind of deciding factor for me.
And actually, Rachel, just one more quick thing. I feel like our community is one of the, and no pressure on the answer here, is one of the really special things about the program. Like, do you feel that that's been borne out and sort of met your expectations, or um, and part of it is I know a little bit about other PhD programs where it's much more kind of commuter remote, people coming in for class and then heading out and doing their own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly I only have the one program to judge my experience based off of, but for what it's worth, last night I went and saw a graduate who I'm still very close with because she happened to be in DC. And so I drove down to DC just to have dinner with her, right? So I think that the relationships that I've built here at Hopkins certainly have persisted past the program.
Lily, I think you have to go fairly soon. Any thoughts on the fit question or anything else you want to say before you have to scoot out the door here? Like gems of wisdom that these folks need to know.
Yeah, so one thing that I do want to mention is usually people would look at potential advisor's publication and what they're doing. But then after I started my PhD, I realized that it will be also beneficial to figure out who might be working, which student might be working with which advisor, and talk to the student as well to figure out if the advisor is a good fit even. So that's my one parting idea.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. Just for the record, the reason Lily has to go is because she's actually teaching a class of master's students. So that's one of the things that is often an experience here as well, just so you know. Lily, thank you again. Appreciate you coming. See you soon. All right, others. Anything you want to add on fit, or should we pivot to the sort of recommendation and personal statement processes and strategies and suggestions you have for navigating that terrain? All right, let's pivot. So lots of parts of the application. I think the two that people tend to have the most questions about typically are like, how do I get recommendations? How do I choose my recommenders? And what do I do on the personal statement and what seems to work well? And since you guys are here, it obviously worked pretty well.
I can speak to recommendations a little bit. As someone who had not been in kind of a research setting before going into the PhD program, I think to the extent to which you can reconnect if you are not currently connected with someone from either your college or master's days. I was lucky to still be in touch with my advisor from my undergraduate degree. I had a minor in education, and so I think having someone who can speak to your ability to Hunter's point to do research, to kind of be in the world of academics, that's useful. And then advice that was given to me that I think is really helpful is, in your current company, if you're going to have like a boss or supervisor recommend you want to go kind of as high up in the company as you can for someone who can speak to your experience, because I think they'll have a broader view of kind of how you contribute to an organization.
I also think when you are choosing your recommenders, so I believe for Hopkins, I believe for all the applications I submitted, and I submitted a lot. So if you want to talk to me about that, I can put my email in the chat. That's a wild experience. I would say two of my recommenders I had really strong relationships with, and one of them was actually just I had taken a non-credit seeking course, and it was just a very recent professor who was able to, speak to my abilities as a student, my most recent ability. But for my two recommenders who I really I had stronger relationships with, I picked them because they were able to speak to my best qualities, my actual experience working in the field, and also they were leaders that I enjoyed working with. And so I think they are the people who'll be able to write the most compelling letters of recommendation. If I put the people who wrote those letters in the same room as my advisors, I think they'd be able to have really good conversations. So I think trying to envision who are the kinds of people you want to keep finding in your life and who do you want to learn from, I think that's a really compelling thing. And that actually also ties back, again, I just want to quickly co-sign on what Lily said, which is get in contact with the PhD students that work with your advisors, because the advisors might sweet talk you a little bit. That's real. It's okay, right? It's all part of the game. But their job is to sell you on the university. The PhD students will be able to talk to you and just watch for all those nonverbal cues of when they might pause and say, let me think about how to phrase this diplomatically. Because there's pros and cons to working with everyone, and some things you can live with and some things are harder. And you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're really struggling because you think this is a good opportunity, but the actual person you're working closest to is someone who you aren't meshing with on some like emotional or social level.
So just very quickly, I thought that was brilliant, underscore this sort of like, yeah, it's a conversation. So imagine your recommender having a conversation with the advisor or person you want to work with. I think that's a great way to sort of conceptualize a little bit of what this admittedly on paper, but what the interaction is. I do want to push back a little bit on one thing, which is there's pros and cons to working with everyone. With Ison and Rachel, there's only pros. They are brilliant and lovely, and there are zero cons. So I'm gonna politely object to that. All right, so you're on the other side. You've been on the other side for a little bit now. Anything you would do differently if you had to do like rewind the clock and do it all over again, at least around the application process and the thinking through sort of which program and where do I belong and what's my identity and does this program fit my aspirational identity? Thoughts in that regard.
I've got an easy one for this one. So my now husband, when I was applying, and I applied 2 years, I didn't get it in anywhere the first year. So again, if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. Email me. But the one of his pieces of advice those whole 2 years was email somebody. Email the people you want to work with. And I was like, no, I don't want to take up anybody's time. Like cold emailing somebody was terrifying for me. And it's funny because Hunter knows I'm pretty like in your face and I'm very social, but the idea of interrupting someone or getting rejected just over email or sending an email and never being answered was so intimidating. I'm helping my brother apply to places right now, and I'm like cold email people. So that is an easy thing that I would strongly encourage is email people. Maybe they'll respond to you, maybe they won't. But definitely try.
Also kind of information if they don't respond to you. So
Right.
I guess just to double down on that, the only places I did get in were places where I had made connections with people ahead of time, right? So, I had a totally opposite experience from Ison. We were fairly location bound when I was applying. So I applied to 4 schools and got into 2 where I had made strong connections with people and did not where I hadn't. And so I think to underscore what Ison is saying, the advice that had been given to me was that applying for a PhD program is distinct from applying from an MBA program or a MD program. You're not looking to just have the best application in the pool. You're looking to make a connection with someone. It's more like applying to a job than it is like applying to a grad school in some ways. And so I think, being able to feel out ahead of time, do you have a good fit with this person? Do your projects match all of that? So it's not necessarily something I would do differently, but just double down on that process, because I think you'll get a good sense of whether you want to be in a place as well as whether you might be a fit for what that place is looking for.
I'm watching the clock a little bit. I want to do a couple more questions and then we will start to, I think, open it up for your questions pretty soon. So if you want to start cogitating on what those ought to be. And all the little logistical, is the GRE mandatory kinds of questions, I think we'll just do those over chat because that's pretty easily answered, and I think Serena is
Yep, I've got them.
of doing those already. But the couple questions I want to ask you guys now. First, most, like, now that you've been in the PhD program a little while, favorite parts, least favorite parts, like what's been challenging and what has made you like, yeah, kind of your favorite part of the program. Let's start with that as number one.
I am by nature a learner. I think that most people who choose to seek out a PhD program probably would describe themselves as such. And so I think I have really enjoyed the ability to immerse myself in things that I didn't know before. And then also, we have the opportunity at Hopkins to take classes, not just in the School of Ed, but across schools as well. I think that's a pretty cool feature of.
Oh, your volume cut out there, Rachel, just a little bit for me anyway.
Previous School of Art.
Rachel, your volume's coming in and out a little bit. Ison, do you have other comments on this?
This might be a little embarrassing. Hello, all participants. Can you repeat? You're just talking about like our experience in the program. What's the question? Sorry.
Oh, yeah. So you've been in the program a little while now. What have been the sort of challenge? Like, I think people in the application stage could really learn from like, oh, and then I got there, and what have the challenges been? What has been your favorite part, kind of thing?
Got it. Sorry, I was distracted by a question, honestly. So I think I also adding on to what Rachel said, like the natural learner, I also identify in that way, like that lifelong learner, natural teacher kind of school education is like in my blood. That said, the PhD program is unlike any other schooling that I've experienced. So in your master's program and in your undergraduate courses, you are being taught like specific content knowledge. And in the education program, and at least our education program, yes, there's content knowledge, but it's all about how do you research your area of interest. So you're bringing the topic. The program is teaching you the approach and the approaches. And I think that that requires you to have a large foundation of questions, which I have, and which a lot of us have. But it also means that one of the things that I'm still working on in my second year is developing like the Goldilocks research question. Because one of my cohort siblings, I call them, he says, because we want the whole enchilada, we want to answer the whole question, but you can't in one study. So I think realizing that like, yes, I have this question, but actually it can be broken down into 20 questions or 30 questions. And the program helps you kind of create this web of things you can answer, which is really exciting. And also kind of like, oh my gosh, the world is so big. Schools are so complicated. Education is such a puzzle. So it's exciting. And it's also like, oh, wow, this is unlike anything I've experienced before.
Yeah, I really like that distinction that most of your education up to the PhD program is, typically kind of content oriented, and the PhD program is really learning processes, right? What are the methods through which you learn to conduct research?
Can I build on that, Hunter?
Yeah, please.
Because I think, some advice that was given to me as I entered the program that I found really helpful is that as a PhD student, you're essentially the CEO of your own company and are building your brand. And so I think to that end, it's both exciting because you can kind of take things in whatever direction you want, and also challenging to figure out, okay, what is it that I want to be and do and say yes to and no to. And so I think going in kind of with that perspective of you're really going to have to be judicious in terms of who you want to be as a researcher, and how you set yourself up for that is both daunting when you come in, but also important and exciting too. So I think just something to think about as you're going on your journey.
Excellent. Dr. CEO, then I'm going to build off that one and say, all right, so then what do you want to do when you grow up, and how should people be thinking about, this kind of takes us back to the very first, like what made you pursue a PhD in the first place? And a lot of people, at least part of it is, well, the kind of job that I would like to have ultimately requires a PhD. And so how have you found, and Rachel, I promise I'm not trying to give you heart palpitations. How have you found the thinking about the job market, maybe Ison for you more, the evolution of how you understand what you want to do once you graduate? And feel free to kind of speak from your own experience or kind of what you've seen in terms of lots of other folks doing in the cohort. And this will be my last question. So as folks want to start populating the chat with other questions, I think we'll pivot into Q&A shortly.
I think my recommendation on that front is whether this person is your advisor or not, I would develop a relationship with someone who has recently been on the job market and can kind of speak to what that looks like right now. I'm lucky that my advisor is in that boat, and so can kind of serve that role for me. And but to talk to that person early about what, based on the job you want, what you need to have on your CV. For example, if you want to go into academia, you really need a number of first author publications to signal your publishing prowess. That process takes a very long time, and so starting early is really important. If you are interested in more of a kind of ed research firm, translational, policy work, they really want to see op-eds and practitioner facing pieces, and you'll get some of that experience in classes. I wrote an op-ed for Hunter's class, for example. You get that practice, but you have to kind of build that muscle for yourself also. And so this doesn't exactly answer your question, Hunter, in terms of like, what do I want to be when I grow up, and how did I develop my CV for that? But I think that knowing what you want to do afterward, like putting yourself in the best position possible and talking to people who have kind of done that work. I think to that end, though, we are in a time where jobs in education are challenging. And so to the extent that you can develop your CV in a way that makes you competitive for multiple types of jobs, that is potentially very useful, right? So teaching classes is helpful if you're going to go into a teaching institution, having, the publication, right? So yes. And so I think thinking about that from day one is important, because it takes time to on ramp into being ready when you're in year 4 and looking for jobs.
So from the perspective of someone who's terrified of the job market, it's not, well, it's kind of true, honestly. But as a first year student, my advisor actually ran like a research group, which was an opportunity which kind of turned into like there were a lot of higher cohort students in the class. So I was the only first year student in that group. And so I actually got to watch a lot of practice job talks and review CVs and get all this experience connecting with people who were on the job market as a first year. So I think that gives me a better understanding. And I passed on a lot of it to my cohort. Like I was talking to them almost every week, like, oh, this was Logan's experience, or this was Andrea's experience, and this was, and kind of trying to share that, because I think it has helped me kind of prioritize different things as I say yes or no to different opportunities. Like I'm already thinking about who could be a good reference for a position if I go the academic route, which I want to. But it also, we have a really great, a really active like career and I think like life design office, I think CLD. So whatever institution you end up at, take advantage of those resources to help you conceptualize what direction you should start moving in. And I do agree, I mean, with Rachel, like I'm feeling not pressured by anybody, but the idea of like, okay, I really got to start writing is definitely building up in my second year. You know, the first year it's like you're building all this really strong foundation, and you are writing. Like almost all of our assignments are created to lead into a publication, an op-ed, something that's usable or transformable into something that'll go onto your CV, which is really great. I think it's one of the ways in which that like apprenticeship model almost appears even in our coursework. Um, but I think having that through line, even if it changes a little bit, is okay. You don't need to know exactly what you're going to do, but you do need to be in communication with what you want to do with the people around you as well, so that everyone can help you. Because somebody told me this once, it is best for everyone when you do well, and you will only do well when you are communicating with your support. I hope that answered the question. Oh my gosh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. I will also just layer in concretely. I feel like we're doing pretty well sending people off to academic positions. I realize the landscape is changing quickly, but I mean, geez, we sent 3 people to Brown just last year, mostly in sort of postdoc positions. Someone's out at Oregon State with a faculty position. Oh, one of the people at Brown rejected a faculty position to take the Brown position. We've had UVA postdocs. We've got faculty members at Vanderbilt in Indiana. The UVA postdoc is now in a faculty role in Korea. We used to have a fair number of people go into the sort of like research think tank places like AIR, American Institute of Research, SRI International, Mathematica, those kinds of places. Obviously, their labor pool has shrunk unbelievably and unbelievably quickly. What we still do have, though, are a handful of folks who have taken positions at being like educational researchers within a university, but not in a sort of traditional research and teaching kind of faculty role. So we actually even have 2 graduates of our program here at the School of Education, which is super nice. All right, so awesome. Thank you guys. Let's get some questions from the chat, and maybe if there's not one that's live right now. Sorry, Serena, is there anything we've got in there that we need to answer?
Yeah. So, we talked about, references, essay. How about the CV? What do you look for when reviewing that, or any tips on composing a CV?
I mean, my quick answer from before is like we're looking for fit and we're looking for sort of probabilities of success. Like, what is your potential as a researcher? A lot of people do send in resumes, which speak more to sort of like job experience kinds of things. And that's fine too. A lot of those people get in. But anyway, I think that would be, my restated stuff I've said before kind of highlight. Ice and Rachel, do you remember what you had on there? Anything you would recommend to folks?
So transitioning from a resume to a CV was something I hadn't done prior to the application process. And I remember being kind of like, what even is that? Like, what is different about it? So I definitely looked up a lot of resources. One of the things that I tried to prioritize what told my story best. So if I'm thinking about my personal statement, my recommendation letters, and my CV, the goal of all of these documents is to communicate a broad picture of who I am, and what I am like to work with. And so I think there are 2 kind of approaches, right? You can make it so that there's a through line where the top, like the front page of your CV reflects a story that you tell in your personal statement that is also deeply emphasized by your recommenders letters. Or you could do it so that if I'm looking at your personal statement, I'm learning something different about you than what I'm really getting from your recommenders letters, who are showing a different side of you. And then your first page of your CV tells me not the completely different, but something that's like, oh, I didn't realize that. So, they were on my CV, I had gotten a grant as a teacher. That is something that like you wouldn't have known from my personal statement or my recommenders. So I kind of put that kind of towards the top. You didn't hear much about the classes that I taught or my experience with students. So I put that near the top. And also, from a teacher background, that's just what I was proudest of. So I don't know if that played a role, but I think those two approaches are different, and you just have to decide how you want to best, what are your best qualities, and how can you use these materials to communicate them.
Rachel, you want to add anything, or are there other questions we should?
I
We
think
can-
Yeah, I think we
Ison had
can.
I think Ison had an excellent response there.
Yeah. I was like, I think we can move on. So there's a couple of questions that kind of assess fit a little bit more. One participant has a question about prior teaching experience in preschool grades and elementary level for 10 years and how it would align well as they're interested in research, but they don't really say what research they're interested in. So can you just speak a little bit about, the backgrounds of students that come into the program, where they come in from teaching and how well they fit? And then another student had a question about the opportunity to be exposed to a variety of concentrations. So I think that both of these kind of tie into the interdisciplinary nature of the program and the fact that we don't have like a track or like a necessary focus for the PhD.
So let me say a little bit on the first one, which is there are plenty of people in our applicant pool who have impressive teaching experience. And so the difference really is going to be, what story is it that you tell us about how that's shaping your research interests and shaping your potential as a researcher. And so people who draw out things like experiences from their practice and say, that's the thing that I think is really important to study. Here's why. Here's my thoughts on how to study it. That lands differently, and I would argue much more positively than, I was a great teacher. Like, kids loved me in the classroom. I'm accomplished. Maybe I won awards in my teaching. Those don't give us a good sense of insight into how you would be as a researcher. And so leveraging the past experience for how it's going to help you do this, basically kind of career shift and this new thing, I think is what I, as someone who reads just lots and lots of these applications, that's what lands on me really positively anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, you want to jump in?
Yeah, if either one of you want to talk about that or the interdisciplinary nature of the program, how you can kind of put together different backgrounds in policy and in psychology, take classes in other divisions, and we don't have a set track.
So I will say, I think it was Rachel who touched on the fact that we can take courses in other schools. So I'm actually in the School of Public Health offers courses on like the quarter system. So it sounds like I'm taking a lot, but really it's not all at the same time. So I'm taking 4 courses with them this semester. So like 2 at a time and then 2 at a time. And that's a really great experience. It gets you kind of out of the bubble of education and you're understanding how different methods are being applied in other places. And it also means that you have the freedom to kind of explore really what suits your research. Oh, I had a thought and I lost it.
Rachel, jump in.
I don't know that I have anything new to add other than what I've said before about interdisciplinary nature of the program and kind of getting to take classes in other places. But if there's another specific question, I'm happy to speak to it.
I remembered my thing too. So one of the cool things about the School of Education is that it has centers. And so I'm sure Hunter could probably speak more to like how that works, but basically there are all these kind of centers that have been established. They kind of operate somewhat separately from the School of Education. Like they have their own grant funding and they have directors and but you know, some of our I think a lot of the advisors actually are affiliated with these centers that focus on different kinds of research. For example, both of my advisors are affiliated with a Center for Safe and Healthy Schools. And so they are specifically interested in researching things like discipline and exclusion, and separate learning environments. And then there's like the Education Policy Institute, and then or the Institute for Education Policy, I'm sorry. The like Everyone Graduates Center. So there's all these different centers where if you are interested in, or there's like the Baltimore Education Research Consortium. So if you are, or BERC, we say. So if you are interested in pursuing a particular kind of area of the field, there's usually, you can probably find kind of a center home for these things, like the Center for Technology and Education. And I think that's one of the ways you can make the experience really individualized, is partnering with or becoming affiliated with faculty that are in these centers.
And it's just on the fit issue, right? This is part of the whole landscape of what the intellectual interests are at the School of Education. And that'll be true for other institutions too. Like, take a look at those institutes and see if there are fits there. Also, maybe find out if there are opportunities to work with people at the research centers and the institutes. There certainly are here, and I don't know the extent to which that is true at lots of other places. Serena, any?
Yeah, there is another question that we haven't touched on at all. A student says that they are curious about how you balance the PhD program with family. This particular person has a 6-year-old son, and just curious about how you manage your time versus your family while being a PhD student.
I can take that one. I'm a mother of 2. My son just turned 6 and my daughter is 8, almost 9. And I think a lot of it, frankly, is around time management. So, you know, again, really good advice that was given to me coming into the program is, 2 hours of work. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Oh, okay. Okay. Screen sharing is on. 2 hours of work when you turn your technology off and you really sit down and focus is very different than 2 hours of work when you're distracted by text messages and emails and all of that. And so really thinking about the times in your day where you can get dedicated work time, thinking about when you do your best thinking, right? I'm a morning person. I hate working late at night. Ison is the opposite of me. So oftentimes I will wake up to an email. She will, or then she sent me late at night, and then I will send her an email far before she wakes up, right? So like know yourself and your work style. It's definitely possible though, right? I think in some ways, it's nice because it's a little bit more flexible, but it means you have to be disciplined. But it's definitely doable. And so I'm happy to, if you want to give my contact information, I'm more than happy to talk to individuals who are parents and interested in how that works. But I will say we have a number of parents who are thriving in the PhD program. And frankly, one of the reasons that I chose to come to Hopkins is because I was a little bit worried that I was going to be alone in that journey, and found other people who had families who were here. And so if you are looking to be in a place where others have similar kind of life experiences, this is a great place to do that.
Awesome. I want to end, Rachel and Ison, with any final like gem of wisdom, strategy from earlier that you want to just underscore as super important. Like, what is the one takeaway thing that you would love to leave folks with? And then I think we'll be kind of at time.
Hunter, can I just address, I just saw one other question in the chat that I don't think that we hit on. Someone had asked if I have, kind of deep qualitative experience. Is that going to put me at a disadvantage coming into a program that is quantitative heavy? And I would say absolutely not, if quantitative methods are something you want to learn. Ison and my advisor does a lot of mixed methods work. I'm a mixed methodologist. I think that having experience in both methods can be incredibly helpful depending on the kinds of questions that you want to answer. And I think that having background in both methods can help make you thoughtful about how you apply each of those methods as well, and how you think about how they can speak to each other. So happy to connect more with anybody who is kind of thinking about methods and the methods they want to employ, because I think one of the strengths, we talked about classes that you can take in other places. Both Eisen and I have taken a variety of methods courses in both qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methodologies. So definitely not at a disadvantage, I don't think.
Excellent. Parting gems of wisdom.
Parting gems of wisdom. Oh my gosh. So I think one of the things that I keep coming back to is just like framing. It's all in how you present yourself. So really think about how you're framing your research interest. I think one of the things that I didn't touch on was being really specific in your personal statement. If there's a prompt that tells you, you want to name 2 or 3 faculty advisors that you'd be potentially interested in working in, be specific. What do you want to learn from that person specifically? How will they support your research? It's okay if you totally forget. I don't know what I said. I don't remember how I thought that Becca or Olivia would help me, but I know they're helping me. So I think be conscious of the framing, but also, this is my one big final thing actually, and then I'll be quiet. I'm so sorry. Hunter knows I ramble. He's looking at me like I need to stop talking. Is applying is a personal thing. Applying to a university is a deeply personal thing. You are laying yourself out on the line, but whether or not you are admitted is a business decision. The university, it's personal, right? The university wants to know you as a person, but who they admit when, how many people they admit, it's timing and it's business. I applied one place, didn't get in one year, and I got in the next year. And it's timing and it's a business decision. So if you get rejected, when you get rejected, it's going to feel personal and it's going to be hard to distance yourself from that, but be encouraged because they weren't ready for you anyways. I think that framing really helped me push through the rejection and try again. Hopkins was my reach school. I can show you the spreadsheet that I made for all the different schools, all the different advisors I was interested in working in, why the different universities. I made a massive spreadsheet, okay? And Hopkins is down at the bottom in gray because I was like, I'm never going to get in. So there you have it.
I love that. So just before we go, I wanted to let everyone know that on the screen share, you'll see my contact information and Raven Minervino's contact information. Raven is not with us today, but she is the academic program administrator for the PhD program. She can be a bridge for you if you contact her between other students, between faculty, if you want to chat with somebody or have really specific questions about the program, the curriculum, and not necessarily about the admissions process. Anything about application, timeline, anything like that, I'm happy to address, and please reach out to me. My contact information is there.
Fantastic. So listen, thank you. I think we're at, if not a moment or two, over time. Huge thank you to Eisen and Rachel. Serena, thank you for orchestrating all of this. And such big thanks for people taking the time out of busy schedules to make it. Yeah, do be in touch if you have other questions about the PhD program. Happy to answer them. And otherwise, we will hopefully see your applications in December. Best of luck with everything.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you to Eisen and to Rachel as well.